start a little bit ahead of that.
Go for it.
So when you called and asked me about participating in this project, and I immediately, when you mentioned the song, I said, oh, I love that hymn. I love that hymn. I love singing that hymn. I love everything about that hymn. And you mentioned having seen me with one of my grandkids out in the pews and thinking of us with this song. And that was very moving. That was very touching to me. And I thought, I don't really want to be taped. I don't like to see myself on film. We aren't going out. We aren't unmasking. But the thought of that image and a place at the table, it just seemed like, yes, this is something I need to do. But I thought about my grandkids and times I've been in church with my grandkids and all my grandkids mean to me. And then I started taking it out bigger than that and how much I absolutely love gathering at table. I don't know anybody who's as obsessed with gathering at table as I am. I think of my grandma's dining room table, which is what we gather around at family holidays. Of the 5 kids, I'm the one that's always hosted the family meals. I'm the one that could only buy a townhome at Green Hills that was big enough to put a kitchen table in because the table is what's important. And that table then saw a different version of what I see as the kingdom of God in all of this when we started having soup suppers. Mm-hmm. If there's been any time that I have looked out and been able to observe what feels like the kingdom of God to me, it was down at soup supper and seeing all the different people that were there, the people and the way they were mixing up. It was a vision that I don't feel like I very often get to see. And it was life-sustaining for me. So anyway, I thought of all these things at the table. I thought about times when I've had the privilege of baking the communion loaf. And I remember Scott holding it high and breaking it open and steam coming out of it because I wanted it to be so warm and so good that people could smell it as he broke it open. I was asked once to make a communion loaf for a wedding. Such a privilege. And recently, some church friends brought me a bumper sticker that says, love people, cook them tasty food. Well, so that's what I'm all about. And so I thought this is going to be easy. This is about food, and this is about table. This is about everybody being included at the table. And I lived with that for several days. And I kept looking for those questions you were going to email me about what this song meant to me. And I don't look at my computer. I don't go to my computer. I don't look at my email very often. And I didn't see those questions until after midnight, the night before the interview was scheduled. And when I saw those questions, I thought, oh no, this isn't about food. This isn't about table. This is about justice. And of course you knew that, but I hadn't been thinking that way. And if it hadn't been after midnight, I think I'd have called and said, Lindsay, I don't want to do this. I didn't want to do it for a lot of reasons. First of all, I didn't think I could do it justice. I didn't think I could be articulate enough to address this issue. But the other thing is, I am really worried about the church. I'm worried about the church universal. I'm also worried about collegiate, but I'm worried about church in general and how many, whether my grandkids and their friends are even going to have the influence of church. And as a person who, until the pandemic, from the point at which we really came to faith or saw the light, Mark and I were in church every Sunday, period, the end. Didn't matter if we were traveling, if we were in the airport, we'd go to a service at the chapel in the airport. If we were in another country, we'd go listen to Mass in a language we didn't even understand. We're that passionate about worship and about what it means to be part of the kingdom of God. And we had our kids, of course, with us. Luckily, we had our kids late, so they weren't part of what I call our heathen years. But so they grew up being part of a family that were the proverbial, if the lights are on and the doors are open, the Blaedels are there. And what that meant is that we raised great kids. It wasn't, all we did right in terms of our parenting was we loved them unconditionally. We blew it on so many things. If the kids see this, they'll be nodding. We blew it on so many things, but we loved them unconditionally, and we had them in church. So we had the influence of this whole community, raising them and teaching them the values that are important. And the values that are important, now I've been in church, what was I, when we started going to church, I guess I was 37. So before that, not so much. A little bit as a child, but basically from the time we married in 71 to when we became churchgoers in 85, no church at all. So I've had some catch up to do. I remember being kind of embarrassed that I didn't know the Bible. And people would quote scripture and they'd quote it chapter and verse. Well, I was one of those people that had no idea where anything was in the Bible. I didn't know the books of the Bible in order. I kind of knew some stories. Like, I knew the things that kept me from feeling like I could be part of church. Like, the dry bones coming together on the desert. I thought, what's that supposed to be about? And I knew some of the hateful things that people used in the Bible. But what I learned when I started coming to church is the essence of it all is about the fact that everybody has sacred worth. Period. The end. You don't really have to know anything else. If you look at all the different stories in the Bible, I don't know, maybe there are exceptions, but I can't offhand think of one. It's that everybody has sacred worth. And that turned my world upside down, because no longer was I doing things because that was the way I was brought up, or because that was the way a functional society works, or that was how to be civilized. It was because I felt a divine calling to treat everybody with sacred worth. And I hope I raised my kids that way. And what I got for it is these two amazing kids. They're amazing to me for so many ways, but they're especially amazing in the way they treat the people around them, the way they are in their neighborhoods, the way they are with their friends, how committed they are. The fact that they both chose fields of study that had nothing to do with power and money. My dad was a radiologist. My husband, a pediatrician. We have been very privileged. We're white, we're educated, we're healthy, we're all the things. The only time I've ever felt any sense of being marginalized was when we lived in the South briefly, and somebody told me I should feel privileged to live in their neighborhood. And I said, what? We've got 2 kids and drive a station wagon and have a Weber grill. And they said, but you're Yankees and you're Army. And we don't know who your daddy was. So that's the tiniest little bit that I felt. Well, life since then has given me much more of my own taste of what it means to be left out of the table. I want, though, before I go there, to go to what collegiate has meant to me. Way more than the church where we came to faith, way more than the church before we came here. We learned a lot of good things, and I was part of Disciple Bible Study, and I became a praying person. I learned a lot about worship. I learned a lot about fellowship. But it was at collegiate that I learned about justice. And I will be forever grateful for that. We walked in those doors. I had no idea that this was what was ahead of me. We stayed, honestly, probably because Mark loves the organ and the music was great and the preaching was good. But I wasn't sure it was the right place for me because I heard about justice, but I didn't hear much about Jesus. People didn't seem to pray. I mean, when we lived in the South, they prayed at every potluck. They prayed at, secular parties. People prayed all the time down there. And I thought, so I went to the forum and I thought, where's God? Where's Jesus? Well, I would say, in the hands and the feet of the people in this church. And I started out with Marion Solomon. Did you ever know Marion? Oh my gosh, the older people like me in this church will be smiling and nodding, because Marion was an absolute warrior for justice. And she was what Mark calls an outrageous older woman. And I feel complimented when Mark says, Deborah, you're becoming an outrageous older woman. I hope I can be an outrageous older woman like Marion, because she would literally have given her life for a just cause. She was in every demonstration. She went down to Georgia to work for the Habitat for Humanity group, and she just fought for justice in everything she did for as long as she lived. But then I started seeing other things. I learned about how it was a member of this church that started the Emergency Residence Project and lived with the people that most of us are afraid of and don't want to be a part of. I learned about people who were regularly making that trip, as was Marion too, to Mitchellville, to the women's prison, to be there for women who were incarcerated, often for wrong reasons, and very often they'd been abused. Even if they were there because of drug use, well, they were drug users because of the circumstances they were in. I learned over time about, well, like our regular participation in Food at First. We have people here who are absolutely faithful to that. When we realized what a refugee problem we have in this town, it was people here who were committed to that. Mark and I went to an event that it was an interfaith event sponsored around this refugee business. And the only people from our church that we saw there, were the people involved in standing up for refugees. I could go on. And when I was privileged, I've been a part of two significant committees or efforts in this church, and I hate committees. I'm not good at committees. I think people who end up with me on a committee don't like having me on the committee. I just don't work well in committees, kind of like I don't work well with computers. But when we were new here, I got invited to be part of a committee to explore becoming a reconciling congregation. Now, people probably don't really believe that I had no idea we had a gay kid, but I had no idea we had a gay kid. But church had taught me that everybody's got sacred worth. For that reason, I had stood up for my backdoor neighbors, who were a gay couple, and a Bible study I had briefly joined, where I learned that they were being told from the pulpit to boycott the restaurants of these two guys because they were gay. Well, I blew up the Bible study. I said, I can't do this. This doesn't feel right to me. So the whole thing kind of fell apart. So anyway, I'd become an advocate and an ally by the grace of God. So that was important work. I never would have believed how hard it was, how hard we worked, and unfortunately, how little we eventually accomplished. The other really privileged committee, the part of the committee that I felt very privileged to be a part of, was a history committee. And I only said yes to that one because Dorothy Schweeder was going to head it. Dorothy Schweeder was an amazing, amazing person. She was a historian and she was a great committee leader, but we worked hard, and I brought the book with me, and I encourage everybody to get a copy out of the church and look at it, because when I read what we as a church do, I just was so proud. There were people doing things in this church that I had no idea about, because people who are doing that kind of work aren't bragging about it. They're just doing it. Anyway, that's collegiate. That's what collegiate is and should be.
Okay.
So basically, I've told about how this has been a love story with collegiate. To me, collegiate has become my church home. It's become my community of faith. It's become part of my marching orders in living the kind of life that I think is a valued life. By the time we realized that we had a gay child, I'd been working on this committee for the church to become a reconciling congregation, which was clearly important and right, already for quite a while. Anna had actually joined the committee. I even remember saying to Anna, Anna, it's okay if you're gay, but if you're not gay, you have to know that people are going to assume that being on this committee that you are. And at that time, she wasn't ready to come out to us, but she was working on the committee already. She was already participating in a spectrum group at her high school. But again, I was just proud because I raised my kids, I hope, to stand up for what's right. I didn't realize she was gay, but I remember once Emily coming to me, asking me, Mom, do you think Anna's gay? And I said, no, I don't think so. Why do you ask? And she said, well, she hasn't really had boyfriends, and a lot of her friends at school are gay. And I said, I think that's just who Anna is. And Emily said, well, what are you going to do if she is gay? And I said, well, love her. What are you going to do, Emily? And she said, well, love her. So that part was pretty easy. But I remember telling Anna, I couldn't be glad she was gay. She asked me pretty early on, was in the car on a trip to Iowa City, I'll never forget it. She said, Mom, I know you love me, and I know you accept that I'm gay, but I need you to be glad I'm gay. And I said, you can't expect that of me, Anna. I can't be glad because I know what you're going to have to go through. You're not going to have the ease that I've had in life. You're not going to have the privilege I've had in life. It's going to be hard. You're going to have people who are claiming you're a sinner, people who, like she even worried that the kids she babysat for, if the parents knew she was gay, they might think she was molesting their kids. That's how outrageously the society has treated gay people. But anyway, I said, you can't expect me to be glad you're gay. And she said, Mom, I can accept no less. So I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I worked on it, and it shouldn't have been so hard. I am so glad she's who she is. I am so glad she's exactly who she is. And it has contributed a depth to marks in my life that without her, life I think would seem kind of shallow. And she's influenced the whole family, not just her sister, my sisters and brother, everybody around us. And I have then had the privilege of, I get to be mom to queer kids who've been basically abandoned by their families, alienated from their families. I get to be mom to them because Anna tells them that I'll love them. The first time we had a booth at Gay Pride here at the church, I was so excited we were doing it. We were helping sponsor it, but I just didn't want to stand behind that booth handing things out. I thought I need to be out with the people. And I asked Anna what I could possibly do. And I hadn't heard of this before. Maybe Anna had. Now it's become kind of common. But she said, well, Mom, you could offer hugs. You could offer mom hugs. So I made a big sandwich board placard. I wore it, free mom hugs. I had more hugs that day. I was in heaven. I had hugs and hugs and hugs and hugs. And it wasn't true of all of them, but a lot of them said, I haven't had a mom hug for a long time. That's heartbreaking. That's just heartbreaking. The second time we participated in Gay Pride, I want still for people to realize that having a gay kid is no different than having a straight kid. That's your kid and you're proud of them, and they're just the same. There's nothing different about them. So I had this idea, and luckily we had one of our kids' classmates had a printing business or a design business. So I had t-shirts made for all of us. Everybody, even the grandkids, we all wore t-shirts that had proud mom of a gay kid, proud dad of a gay kid, whatever, on the back, proud sister of a gay kid on the front. Anna Blaedel's mom, Anna Blaedel's dad, Anna Blaedel's aunt. Luckily, Anna has been willing to take on this battle. I remember early on in the church, she wanted so much to change the church and change the world that she was willing way back then, I see now, to sacrifice herself. I didn't see it then, but I remember people in this church saying to me, Deborah, don't talk about this. Don't talk about this, about Anna being gay, because, it's apt to make trouble. It's apt to get her in trouble. It's apt to really be a problem for the church and for Anna. Anna, on the other hand, said, Mom, I trust your judgment. Out me to the bishop if you want. I trust your judgment. It's got to be done. Well, so I've had the privilege, and it's been kind of exciting to be part of the ride. It's not exciting anymore. It's not exciting anymore. There's very little fun in it. It's the reason I was hesitant to come in here and talk about it. I didn't want to cry on the film, but also I'm so angry. And I feel like people are wearying of this fight. Those of us who've been fighting it are getting old and tired. And every time the issue presents itself, even if just marginally, when I open my mouth, I almost feel like I can see people, their eyes glaze over, they roll their eyes. It's like, here she goes again. Not only that, this church was so unbelievable in supporting Anna in her fight with the church. I will never, ever get over how supportive the church was. How many people wrote letters? People I never dreamed would make the effort wrote letters to the bishop. We have a friend that actually, for a month, sent a work of art, because that was her medium, sent a work of art to the bishop every day. Well, guess what? It didn't work. It didn't work. Anna was basically sacrificed to this. The church has become a place that people who care about this issue don't want to be. My own kids, Emily and her family, are not in church anymore. And that's a primary reason. And honestly, every time I write a check to the church, which I do, other people have left the church, other people have quit donating to the church. I have not. I have either increased or kept my giving at the same level all along. And the only reason I haven't been in church really is COVID. But it's a lot harder now, because every time I write that check, I think, what am I doing? I'm contributing to the institution that has really practically taken my daughter's life. It's taken her sense of spiritual home. It's taken her livelihood. It's put her in a place I just never would have believed she would be. So anyway, here I am. What I want to say is that, like it or not, we are complicit. It's the church, the greater church now, not collegiate and not United Methodist, but it's the church that's teaching parents that their kids are sinners. It's the church that keeps telling the society that this is a choice. It's not a choice. They're not sinners. I like to compare it to being left-handed. It's not the dominant way, but it's not a wrong way. It's sometimes an inconvenient way. I've learned that my left-handed friends, I have to seat at a certain place at the table just so that they've got elbow room. But they deserve a place at the table. They deserve a place at the table as much as you or I do. And we aren't doing enough. We just aren't doing enough. Collegiate's not doing enough. Our bishop, the Iowa Annual Conference, is not doing enough. Our bishop is a nice person. I believe our bishop is a sincere person and means well. But our bishop is not showing courage. Our bishop is not showing leadership. The Iowa Annual Conference, like Mark said on the way over here, he said, Anna tried to play nice. Well, we all tried to play nice. We wrote letters to the bishop. We thought this was going to make a difference. It didn't. We told people they were welcome here. We tried to make it a fact. we kind of said, well, we'll do gay weddings. But we did gay weddings quietly in the chapel or somewhere else. We need to be bold, we need to be brave, we need to stand up, and we need to change this. Because until we do, we are complicit. And every check I write is a hypocrisy, because those dollars, and I remember talking to Scott about it. I've talked to several pastors. Is there a way I can continue to support collegiate, but not support the institution? And there isn't. He said, well, yeah, there is technically, but all that means is they'll take money from other people's checks to fill in these other blanks. And I don't know if disaffiliation is the answer, but we can't just keep doing the other things, the refugee stuff and the homeless stuff and the poverty stuff and all the other stuff. We can't just keep doing that and thinking these other things are going to eventually work themselves out. Eventually the church will get it right. Eventually we'll split. That's not okay. That's absolutely not okay. Kids are dying. Kids are dying still. They're committing suicide. They're being chased out of their homes. They're still going to the coasts and the cities because they can't live. They can't live full lives. As long as this society, reinforced by what people consider the moral authority, and that is the church, God's self, a lot of people think. I mean, people really give church that kind of power. Well, believe me, church doesn't deserve that kind of power, not for what they're doing to people. So if it hadn't been for my long history with collegiate, I'd be out of here so fast. And when we prepare this time of year for our tax preparer to do our taxes, I look at the amount I give the church, and it's way out of proportion to my confidence in the church right now. But I want this. I want what it's meant to me for the future. I want it for my grandkids. What looked before like this wonderful relationship with the church, first time I sat in that pew all alone when I came here to find us a house, I thought, by the grace of God, I may watch both of my kids be married in this church. By the grace of God, we'll worship here until we die, and our funerals will be in this church. Well, one of my kids can't be married in this church. The other one doesn't want to be a part of this church as long as the church has these policies. I barely want to be here, and I do, but barely. So when I realized that this was what I was going to have to talk about, and I told Mark, I don't want to do this. It's too hard, and I think I'll alienate people. I think I'll make people mad. I don't want to do this. And Mark is a funny guy. Those of you who know Mark know he's got a very, very strange sense of humor. But he's very supportive, and he loves our kids. And I said, I don't think I can do justice to this. If either of our kids sees this, I don't want them to be going, oh, Mom, what did you say? And he said, well, couldn't you make it about the Ukrainians or orca whales or something? And, I'm never sure with Mark whether he's serious or being funny. But I said, no, I can't make it about Ukrainians and orca whales. But, as I was thinking about it, I can make it about Ukrainians. I can make it about Ukrainians because it took a long time for people to realize just how bad things were. And it took some people seeing George Floyd on the TV murdered over and over and over. It took us seeing that with our own eyes to become part of Black Lives Matter and to be willing to make the effort to stand up to support Black politicians and Black businesses. Well, seeing Putin's army kill a family, a mother and father and kids, see them, we're ready now. We're ready to pay higher prices at the pump. We're ready now to do things we wouldn't have been willing to do before. Well, I don't know what it's going to take, but we've got to be ready now. We've got to be ready. We've got to be impassioned. Those of us who are involved in other parts of the church, involved in the other issues that are also important. Yes, they're all important. People used to say, oh, is this a one-issue church, or all we're going to talk about is gay stuff? No, it's just that gay people, and now especially trans people, are the ones that are being most victimized right now, that need us the most. So we can't keep doing the other things that the church should do and not stay in this fight. So I don't know, Lindsay. I wish you had an answer for me. I don't know what the answer is. I appreciate so much the effort you're making, but I don't know where we go from here. But I know we've got to be louder, we've got to be stronger, we've got to be bolder. If way back when, instead of writing letters to the bishop, we had said, Bishop, this is wrong. We're not going to do this anymore. We're gonna do any weddings anybody wants. We're going to do them in the sanctuary. We're going to risk our credentials. I know a lot of people who've been willing to risk their credentials, but for one reason or another, we don't quite have the boldness to stand up and do what's right. So anyway, forgive me. I've told my kids, don't let me show my mama lion claws, because I'm a mama lion, but I'm ready to fight. But I'm old and I'm tired and I've got an arthritic and Mark's got Parkinson's and we live in a retirement community and I don't know how to fight anymore. I don't know. The other thing that I wanted to mention is a place at the table, to me personally, has come to mean more as I've experienced more of what it can mean to not have a place at the table. I learned that very, very, very personally with Anna and Anna's issues, but I also learned it when we discovered that our middle grandchild wasn't meeting any of her developmental milestones. It was a heartbreaking time. Nora was seeing, I think there were 6 different specialists involved because she had all those issues. She had swallowing issues. Her hips weren't right. Her heart wasn't right. They finally said she had global developmental delay. That means every part of her body and her mind were delayed and maybe weren't going to work right. And we didn't know if she'd ever walk. We especially didn't know if she'd ever talk. Even into the efforts of various kinds of therapy as she was growing, her parents were told that she had Apraxia of Speech. That means no speech. No speech. This is our beloved grandchild. Well, at that time, Emily and Nick were bringing their kids to church pretty regularly, and we always sit in the front pew on the left. That's just been our custom. We pay better attention when we're up there. We aren't as distracted as easily, and we can see those adorable kids during children's time. And when we have communion, oh, I love communion, we get to see the saints walking up the aisle. So anyway, we're always in the front. When Nora finally learned to crawl, she would sometimes escape. And she would crawl up to the pulpit. She would crawl up to whoever was preaching, or she would crawl up. She would escape. And it would take sometimes a little while for her family to corral her and get her back. And there were 2 things that happened. And, if it hadn't been for the circumstances, I might have been embarrassed. But we were so thrilled to see her crawling. And people in church didn't all know what was going on. And I did sometimes think, I wonder if they're critical. I wonder if they wonder why we're letting this kid do this. But instead, people said, oh, it's so good to see Nora doing what she's doing. We're so glad she's here. Well, the Farrs always sat near us, but is that the transept? They sat in the transept. And Bob Farr started praying for Nora. And the day that he saw her take steps, Bob wept. Bob wept. He said, this has been my prayer all along. And he said, now I'm going to pray for God to open her lips. I don't know if you've seen Nora lately, but Nora's a chatterbox. She's my little love bug. I love that child so much. I certainly don't love her less than I love the other 2. She is an especially empathetic child, a sensitive child, but she also is a child that rides her bike and runs races. She's going to have challenges, but I wish and hope that somehow Bob Farr could know that his prayers were answered. Her lips have been opened. Now, she's had a lot of therapy. She's had a lot of help. But that's what church can and should be. It's people rooting for you, people wanting the best for you. Now, my most recent thing, I have to mention Mark. Mark, of all the people I know, when he was young and able-bodied, is the one who wanted to be helping people. He's a non-judgmental person. He always wanted to be there helping in any way people needed help. He's never liked the limelight. He's always been kind of slow of speech, and he's just Mark. But when Mark was first sensing that he was not as sharp as he thought he should be at work, we didn't know why, but he felt like he shouldn't be working anymore. And we started pursuing what was wrong. Why was he having trouble? And we couldn't figure it out. We didn't know then that he definitely already had Parkinson's disease. Well, Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurological illness that affects every single organ system you have. People think it's about a tremor or about walking. It's about way, way more than that. But here's how the church supported us when I think other parts of society wouldn't have. One of our church friends said, when Mark can't drive anymore, I'll give him rides. The few other guys that he set up for soup supper with, he set up every Wednesday noon for years and years and years. Again, quiet behind the scenes. They set all the tables. They set up the coffee. It took an hour or more. But then they'd have lunch together. And then they got to kind of be a disc golf group. Same group of people, basically. Mark got so he had trouble even not falling playing disc golf. They would pick him up. They would help him to his feet when he fell. He got so he'd toss the disc and it'd go in the trees or it'd go in the creek. They'd fish it out of the creek. They would watch where Mark's disc went because Mark had trouble following it, knowing where it landed. They did that for him. As he has had increasing problems for years now, hasn't been able to drive, often walks with a walker, has trouble remembering things, has all sorts of other trouble. Those people have been faithful to him. They are still, even in COVID, meeting every week for the lunch that they used to have together after they set up for soup supper. They did it on Zoom. When it became possible, they would do it outside. But they have been so faithful. So I have experienced now in my life being marginalized, or situations where I or my loved ones would be marginalized and aren't in the church. So I guess that's what makes me have hope for the church. That's what makes me stay in the church. That's what keeps me writing those checks every week, is because I really believe with all my heart that should be the guiding force in our lives. It should be church. It should be being in church whenever the doors are open. It should be having sermons, having worship, having hymns. I mean, we're talking about a hymn. This hymn writer wrote songs about justice. I think all of her songs are about justice. She was passionate for justice. I kind of naively thought it was about food and tables because I wasn't really thinking about it. But God will delight. I mean, we need to delight God. We need to have joy in the justice. And that is my hope for the church. My hope for the church is that Collegiate can reclaim the glory of some of the things we've done and been, but to include this horrible, tragic omission.
Shelter, a a space, a safe place for growing, for everyone born, a star overhead. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy.